the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass, ready to take names and, of course, kick some ass. That's kind of my new catchphrase thing, if you hadn't caught on. But here we are. Happy Thursday, everybody. February 21st, 2019. Why do I specify the date? Why am I talking dates here? It's because today is the first ever. It's a revolutionary day, a day where I am going to talk about my version of the horror movie Oscar Awards. Yes, obviously, as we know, the Oscars are this Sunday. There is no host to the show. There's no way I'm watching the show because all it is a bunch of pretentious actors, actresses, directors, and writers that think their poop doesn't stink, and I don't really like that personally. But I'm here, and I'm the host of this one. This is the very first annual Carrie Awards show. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Carrie Awards show. The other night, I was thinking of a title for this show. I was thinking of maybe the Grande Awards show, maybe the Graveyard Awards show, which for a while was going to be the name of this show. But I actually came across an awesome picture on the internet, and it was Carrie, and she was kind of golden in the picture. And I kind of put two and two together. I was like, that kind of looks like if Carrie was an Oscar statue, that Carrie, it's exactly that. And I was like, that would be brilliant. Instead of Oscar awards, hand out Carrie Awards of this girl, traumatized at the prom, covered in pig blood and in gold, 24 karat gold. And I figured, this has gotta be the name of the show. I just thought it was too perfect. And the same thing with the whole women in horror kind of theme of horror movies, because women kind of dominate the genre. They always have, always will, the whole concept of the final girl. And I figured, why not tribute to Carrie? Because I don't know who the hell Oscar was, to be honest with you. Like, I have no idea who he was, what he was, or anything like that. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this my own. I'm going to have fun with this. And basically, I'll give you the rundown. It's basically like all of the normal Oscar categories. I have Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, supporting roles, obviously, and then even to stuff like Best Special Makeup Effects, Best Director, Best Original Score, Best Cinematography. I'm going to cover all of that. I added a couple of my own categories, like Best Horror Movie Killer, that's a category, Best Horror Movie Monster and or Creature, I added that category, and of course, I actually have the Lifetime Achievement Award I will be giving out today. So, should be a really fun show, just talking about some of the icons of horror, some of the actors, actresses, people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into this stuff for our entertainment. And I figured that would be the perfect thing to discuss, and it'd be a good time of the year to talk about it since the Oscars are so damn close. So, yeah, without further ado, we're going to get right into this. I'm going to jump around a lot. I don't really have a set, list or a set order of all these movies and actors and actresses and stuff like that, but we're going to just have fun with this and so on and so forth. But the only criteria, I do have a little bit of a criteria rule to this, and I know a lot of people are like, how are you judging this? Did you take polls? I did not take polls. This is basically just my own personal, if I was running the show, which I kind of am, obviously, with the help of my lovely producers, Matt and Ty. I love you guys. Yeah, too sweet. But yeah, I figured I'm running the show, so why don't I just pick these? Some of these are definitely more biased choices, I can't help myself. But there are some where I totally think I just went with what a majority would say in the horror community. Like if you asked what the best picture was, if you asked stuff like that to a horror fan, what their answer would be. So I figured that would be fun to try to keep it as unbiased as I could, but I will preface by saying some of these will be biased. And on the flip side, the only criteria, the only rule I had coming into this is that if an actor and or actress, director, whatever, has already won an Oscar for their respective role, they cannot be nominated and they cannot win an award on my show. So, unfortunately, Miss Kathy Bates in the classic James Caan movie with her and who directed that? Rob Reiner film Misery. Kathy Bates did not make the cut because she already won the goddamn Oscar for it. So I figured that would be kind of repetitious if she won an Oscar on my show or took a nomination spot. Was she great? Absolutely. But she already won. She already kind of had her day in the sun. And this is for people that didn't. This is for the actors, filmmakers, all that stuff in the horror business that didn't get their day in the sun. Because, if you really think about it, on the forefront, horror has always been a genre that people have kind of blacklisted and blackballed and have kind of just shoved it aside for whatever reason. It's never really gotten the respect that it deserves and the respect that it's due. And I think it's kind of a crying shame. Like, I think there are a lot of people on this list that if the Oscars actually looked at the horror genre and considered it to be worth something, I think these people would be totally justified to get nominations. But for whatever reason, that'll never happen. They prefer to nominate movies like Roma that are depressing, and because it's depressing and serious, that means it's obviously an Oscar movie, or because it's political, it has to be an Oscar movie. And it's just, I don't know, I feel like the horror movies genre has always kind of gotten the shaft when it comes to stuff like that. But I mean, that is what it is. You're never going to change it, and that's why I don't watch the Oscars. It's really not for me. I think it's for preps that think they know film, but they just don't have fun with it. And that's just my humble opinion there. But without further ado, let's get into the Carrie Awards. We're going to start with a big one, and then I'm going to jump around like crazy. So we're going to have some fun with this. I don't know how long a show this will be. This I don't know. This is kind of just playing this one by ear. It might go forever. It might be shorter than usual. I really don't know, because this is the first annual Carrie Awards. So let's kick this off. Let's do it, baby. All right, we're going to start with a biggie. So I got the biggie sheet right here. Obviously, I'm not going to cover it because I do have the winners highlighted, so I don't want to ruin any of this so people could see on camera. But we're going to start with a big one, and we are going to start with Best Supporting Actor. Yes, Best Supporting Actor in a Horror Film. Here are the nominees. I feel like I should put on like a voice for this. Here are the nominees for Best Supporting Actor in a Horror Film. I can't do that the entire show. It'll just get annoying, trust me. So Best Supporting Actor in a Horror Film, we have Bill Moseley for The Devil's Rejects, Edwin Neal for The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Matthew Lillard for Scream, Dan Hicks for Intruder, and Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger in all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films that he participated in, which is pretty much all of them, exception of that crappy remake that should burn in hell. That's for a Razzie show. That should go on the Razzies, because that is a worse picture in my opinion. But for Best Supporting Actor, you look at these five guys and you really actually have a lot of range, I think. I mean, you look at Bill Moseley, that performance he has in The Devil Rejects as Otis is just so memorable. Like, I'll never forget some of the lines. Like, I think that's a really well-written movie as well. Like, some of the lines where he has these two guys captive, and he's kind of talking down to them, and he stabs one, and the wind is blowing in his hair as he's kind of talking down to them. And I'll never forget the line he says, I am the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's work, as he takes out the guy. I mean, that's just always, I thought that was such a wow kind of moment, kind of a surprising, didn't see that coming type of thing. And I just think that was phenomenal. What he was able to do is there are points where Bill Moseley's able to make you laugh, and he's able to make you feel kind of sick to your stomach. And that's really the best thing I think a horrific performance and an actor that is playing a character of that role should do. He should terrify you a little bit. But when he shows his human side, when he's funny, when he's denying Baby and Captain Spaulding of getting their Tutti Frutti ice cream, that's where you laugh. But for a minute, you're like, this is a human being at the end of the day. See, in House of Thousand Corpses, I love the character because it's just so backcrap crazy, and the albino and all the anti-America and anti-God, speeches that he has. I mean, those are just classic. They're really funny. But with this movie, I think he was really able to expand upon that character and take it somewhere where no other actor could have. And I think only Bill Moseley could have done that. So that's why he's a nominee on this list. Edwin Neal. I just love Edwin Neal. I think his performance in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is fantastic. Obviously, he plays the hitchhiker character that they pick up at the beginning of the film, and he's taking their picture and talking about how back in the old days, how they used to slaughter cows was the correct way of slaughtering cows, as opposed to now when they shoot them with a gun, and he says, the gun's no good, that gun's no good, and I took your picture, it's a good picture. He is just super creepy. I've talked to people about that performance, and I say it's almost like a demented James Franco. Like, if you watch that scene and just have James Franco on the brain and watch his performance, it looks like James Franco gone crazy. Like, and it's so entertaining, man. I think he does such a good job, and like, it's very scary. Like, and fast forwarding to, of course, the classic dinner scene at the end where Marilyn Burns is screaming for her life. He's kind of the main one taunting her, and he's the main one screaming at her and pushing food in her face, and let's let Grandpa have this one. I mean, he was the most sadistic of all of them. Like, the cook, was he creepy? Absolutely. Was Leatherface an icon? Absolutely. That's the number one thing that most people remember from that movie. But to me, the scariest thing about that movie, the thing that keeps that movie in my brain all the time, is that hitchhiker is seen in the beginning and the scene towards the end. I mean, it's a great supporting role because you just remember it. Like what's his total screen time? Does anybody really know? Is it 10 minutes? Is it less than 10 minutes? I really don't know. But it's the memorability factor. That's the importance of his supporting role. There's nobody that watches that movie, leaves the theater, and doesn't remember that creepy hitchhiker that got in their car. And I just think that he does a great job. And obviously he was a real Vietnam War vet that had just come back from the war, so he was actually a little bit nutty, because nobody comes back from any war the same as they left. Like, they leave their house. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things. It's sometimes it changed for the worse, and most times it changed for the worse. And people become very tense, and people become very a lot more protective and a lot more safe. But he just nailed it. I think he hit the nail on the head with his performance. I think Edwin Neal does a great job, and I think he's more than deserving of being a nominee on this list. We have Matthew Lillard from Scream, of course. I just love Stu Macher, one of my favorite Wes Craven characters, and I guess, well, technically a Kevin Williamson character if you want to get technical with the writing there. Just love the reveal at the end with him and Skeet Ulrich, and you broke the rules, Sidney. Now you gotta die. Those are the rules. And you face it, Sidney. Your mother was no Sharon Stone. Like, oh man, like that stuff is hilarious. I just love Matthew Lillard in the original Scream because he is having a ball once you learn that he's the killer. And I love it. He's on the phone with Sydney, and did you really call the cops? And she's like, you bet your sorry ass I did. And then he just kind of starts crying. My mom and dad are going to be so mad at me. Like, oh man, it's so funny because he's able to, again, it's another performance where he's kind of blurring the lines. Sadistic serial psycho killer on one hand, but kind of a funny high school kid on the other that feels bad and is remorseful for what his parents will think of him about the stuff that he's done. That's not easy to do, to blur those lines. It could have very easily been laughable and let's pass this on. But I think Matthew Lillard really does a good job. I think he almost outshines Skeet Ulrich, who's supposed to be the main killer of the two. I always think that Stu Macher was the best killer in that entire franchise because we see so little of him, because we know so little about him. And I think he just nailed it. I also love the scene where Skeet Ulrich mentions to Sidney that the real reason he's doing the murders is because his mother moved out and abandoned him because his father was cheating on her with Sidney's mother. Sorry, that's kind of convoluted there. But when he says that, when he hears the motive behind Billy Loomis's crimes, even Stu doesn't know, and for a minute he's just shocked. That's great, because the whole time Stu didn't even know why they were doing what they were doing. He was just along for the ride. That's a psychopath. They're just like, yeah, I'll come along, kill people with you. Like, that is a Psycho 101, and I love stuff like that. So Matthew Lillard, more than deserving to be on this list. Dan Hicks from Intruder. This is one that I never hear people mention. I love this role, and I love this character. It's basically, if you haven't seen Intruder, it's a classic slasher film in a grocery market, obviously directed by Scott Spiegel, who worked with guys like Sam Raimi, Ted Raimi, Bruce Campbell, that whole group of guys. It's a classic slasher if you have not seen it. And if you're wondering who Dan Hicks is actually the killer in the movie, and it's a whodunit mostly until the end. And when we find out that Dan Hicks is the killer and what his motive is, again, it's another moment where I'm like, wow, this is awesome, because he's part owner of this grocery store that they all work in, and they're going to close the store down. And so he decides, for whatever reason, to just murder the entire staff. And so it comes down to him versus the final girl, and she's like, why are you doing this? Why did you do this? And he kind of just goes, I'm just crazy about this store. And like, he's just over the top hillbilly type of murderer. And like, I don't know, man, it is so much fun when you watch it. Like, I remember the first time being stunned that it was him. Like, I was like, I knew it wasn't, they gave a bunch of red herrings. There were a lot of red herrings where I was like, it's not them. But when it comes down to him and how crazy he is, it's so fun to watch. And the lead girl actually, she says, you're a disgusting human being. And she spits on him. And she kind of spits like right in the center of like where his lip meets his chin. And he kind of just smiles and like licks the spit off and chases her. It's so crazy. Like, it's one of my favorite finales to any slasher movie. There's, of course, he has a decapitated head and he's banging it against his leg. He's like, what do you say? And he's like, you say anything? And it's just, wow. Like, you could see that Dan Hicks was having a ball with being the serial killer in this late 80s slasher classic. I love the movie Intruder, and I think the reason that it stands out to me, other than the great gore effects, because that's really the star of the movie, is the fantastic gore effects done by K&B. It was their first project they ever did, actually, as the name K&B. I just think Dan Hicks does a great job with this role. He has fun with it. He is over the top with it, but that's what the role called for. It's a cheesy slasher film. He didn't have to be serious. He didn't have to blur lines like Edwin Neal and Matthew Lillard did, and Bill Moseley, like the other three did. He just had to have fun with it, and he has so much fun with it, it becomes memorable, and that's why it's so great. And then, of course, Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger. What the hell can you say? I mean, Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger is just a legend. I don't know. It's very tough to not... I can't even do his words any justice. So we will just get to a winner. Obviously, Robert Englund's a legend. But the winner for the very first Carrie Award, I am going to give it to Edwin Neal, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as the hitchhiker. I think there's just so much realism in the role. That's kind of why I have to give it to him. I mean, a real Vietnam War vet coming back and filming in like 100-degree heat in the hot sun. I mean, and I know there are all sorts of stories that room, the kitchen they shot in at the end, the dinner scene, it was like 110 degrees in the room, and he wanted to kill Tobe Hooper for making them work such long days. He's just one of those, like, he seems crazy in interviews, and so... I don't know. I just have all the respect in the world for Edwin Neal. I think he's more than deserving of the Best Supporting Actor award. I just think he did a great job. So that is the very first Carrie Award I give out. Edwin Neal, Best Supporting Actor for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And now we'll do a couple of smaller categories. Let's do Best Special Effects. Best Special Effects, I have Rob Bottin for The Thing, Brian Johnson for Alien, Tom Savini for Day of the Dead, Rick Baker for An American Werewolf in London / Videodrome, and Kevin Yeager for A Nightmare on Elm Streets Part 2, 3, and 4. Yes, this was very difficult to choose a winner for, because I think the effects work in all of these movies is just top notch. I mean, The Thing is one of the best practical effect makeup movies ever. Alien, who could forget the scene where the alien bursts out of the chest, the xenomorph. Day of the Dead, of course, a classic zombie film with all the blood and Captain Rhodes being ripped apart with the sheep guts. I mean, that's just legendary. Rick Baker, the transformation scene in American Werewolf in London, and the hand kind of growing and slowly but surely becoming this beast. I mean, I thought that was really smart. And Kevin Yeager, of course, with Elm Streets 2, 3, and 4, the design of Freddy, the design of the souls being trapped in Freddy's body, and Welcome to Primetime, and all this stuff that Kevin Yeager was able to do. Of course, he also designed Chucky. Like, he's done a lot of special effects makeup work. All 5 of these guys have done so much stuff in their career. It's almost hard to single them out. But if I had to go with one, I'm going to have to go with Tom Savini for Day of the Dead. I think it is the best movie for gore. I think it's the best looking blood I've seen in any film. I just love it. I think there's a great scene where Dr. Frankenstein is kind of showing Laurie this zombie that he has, and he has the whole gut cut open, and the zombie kind of leans over to try to grab her, and its entire like organs and body and guts and all this stuff just oozes out and hits the floor. It looks real, man. This is Tom Savini's masterpiece, Day of the Dead. Like, you look at a movie like Dawn of the Dead, even. The blood in that movie it's almost like melted crayon. But that's the charm of that movie, you know? It doesn't look real, but it's just the fact that it's a comic book film, so the blood almost goes with the movie. But with this is a real gritty, grimy, this is not a feel-good zombie movie. This is one of those zombie movies you put on and it's kind of serious. And I think it threw a lot of people at the time, but man, the effects just go perfectly with it. I think it is a masterpiece. There's just so many scenes I could think of. The taking the arm off after Miguel gets bit. She chops his arm off, pushes it away. I think it's one of the best-looking kind of prosthetic effects. Of course, all the gunshots to the head and Gary Clark shooting his brains out. And, oh, man, I just think some of the stuff is great. The drill to the head of the zombie, always thought that looked real. I mean, Savini was just a great guy to pull off gags. I mean, you look at Friday the 13th Part 4, you look at Maniac, you look at The Burning. He was just always the best, I think, horror movie special makeup effects. He got his name in slasher movies, he got his name in Friday the 13th and Dawn of the Dead and all these things. And I think Day of the Dead was his masterpiece. I don't think he ever topped it. I don't think he ever reached that star again. But with that being said, I think he just does a phenomenal job. I love Tom Savini's effects in Day of the Dead, and I think he's more than deserving of the Carrie Award. So let's move on to... Let's see. Let's do Best Cinematography. Let's jump off to a more technical one. Best Cinematography. We have our nominees. John Alcott for The Shining. Sergio Salvati for House by the Cemetery. James Lemo for Madman. Dean Cundey for The Thing. And Koichi Kawakami for Three Extremes, the segment Cut, which was directed by the legendary Takashi Miike. Now, you look at all these names, man. You got some names. Like Dean Cundey is one of the best cinematographers ever. Of course, longtime John Carpenter collaborator. He worked on Halloween, The Thing. I mean, almost every movie he made. Christine. Dean Cundey from like the late 70s to like the late 80s, for that 10-year gap, Escape from New York, was working as the cinematographer for all Carpenter's films. And that's why I know Carpenter gets all the respect in the world, as he should. He's one of the best horror directors of all time, and he may be nominated for that very same award. I don't know. I mean, you just go out on a limb there. But I mean, Dean Cundey always gave Carpenter's films a specific scope. And I just love Dean Cundey. I think the guy is super underrated. He never really gets the credit that he deserves. I think he always kind of adds a blue tint to all his movies. Like Halloween has that blue tint throughout it. The Thing, because of the snow, because of the atmosphere, it adds to the atmosphere almost, that blue tint. And I just think he does a great job. I absolutely love Dean Cundey. And lesser known guys like James Lemo. I don't think he did too much more than the cinematography for Madman, but I would be honest, the star of Madman is the cinematography. The scene of the Madman in the tree, kind of stretched out and in the shadows, and again another blue background and behind. That is just eerie. That is so well done, and it's creepy. That's what a great cinematographer for a horror movie does. He makes it look beautiful while aesthetically making it terrifying. That's a really hard kind of happy medium to find, but I think that James Lemo does a fantastic job in Madman. He made just everything about it. It's a cold film. When you're outside, you almost can feel kind of the chills running up and down your spine. That's great cinematography. Just some fantastic shots. It was actually shot not an hour from where I live on Long Island. I can drive to it right now. Like, it's very close to where they filmed it. I think James Lemo did a great job. I think it's a shame that he didn't have much of a career after that. Of course, Sergio Salvati for House by the Cemetery. I think that's a gorgeous goddamn movie. I think it's fantastically done. Really underrated again. I know a lot of people go crazy about The Beyond, and they go crazy about City of the Living Dead, which is, I think, rightfully so. I love City of the Living Dead. But for cinematography, I think House by the Cemetery is Fulci's best film, and I think it's Sergio Salvati's masterwork. I think he did a great job with it. Koichi Kawakami, that's a guy that not a lot of people are going to know. He worked with Miike quite a bit. I love Takashi Miike's films, and Cut is another one where it kind of takes place in the snow. There's a lot of snow, and there's in essence a lot of fire in the story as well. It's one of those you'd have to go into it to kind of tell the whole story, but there's a lot of scenes in the snow, and there's a lot of scenes with fiery debris, and it's just that's kind of the whole story. It's two polar extremes. It's the cold side of things and the hot side of things, and I just think he does a great job doing that. And of course, John Alcott for The Shining, another movie that kind of has to take place in the snow. If you can't tell, I like The Thing, Cut, The Shining, Madman. All these movies have very blue tint cinematography to them. So the way to my heart is the blue tinted cinematography, obviously. I see this was really hard to pick a winner. I really wanted to go with Dean Cundey. I probably should have, just being the horror mark that I am, especially for Carpenter films. But I went with John Alcott. I went with John Alcott for The Shining because I think it is one of the best cinematography jobs I've ever seen in any movie, and I think it's more than deserving the Carrie Award again. I love it's just claustrophobic, and the maze and the aesthetics of the hotel and the weird carpeting and room 237 and the bathrooms and the golden room. I mean, it's just really well done. It's gorgeous to watch. It's gorgeous to look at. It's so goddamn well done. I had to give it to him. I think he was fantastic cinematographer. It's very sad that he passed away before Kubrick made his next film, Full Metal Jacket, in 1987. He passed away before that movie came out, unfortunately. So, I mean, it is what it is. But I think John Alcott's one of the best cinematographers to ever live, and I think he really should have won the Oscar for it. He should have been nominated for it. It's a crime that they didn't nominate him. So, posthumously, I'd like to award John Alcott the Carrie Award for Best Cinematography in a Horror Film. We'll do one more small one, and then we'll go to Best Supporting Actress. How about that? Let's do Best Horror Movie Killer. We have the nominees: Michael Myers for Halloween, Freddy Krueger for A Nightmare on Elm Street, Jason Voorhees for Friday the 13th. Of course, you have to have the big three on there, ladies and gentlemen. Pam Springsteen for Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. That's a biased one. I'm sorry. I'm biased. I love her so much. Eric Freeman for Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 as Ricky Caldwell. Yes. This one was obviously kind of between the big three, and I just threw the other two on there just to have them say, like, oh, they were nominated kind of thing. But it really comes down to Myers, Krueger, and Voorhees. And to choose my favorite killer, it was tough. It was tough because I love all specific things about them, and for all different reasons. I love that Michael is kind of in the shadows, and Michael is kind of stalking before his kills, and the shape, and the devil's eyes, the blackest eyes. Just always loved that origin. Freddy Krueger, of course, the voice that horror needed in the 1980s, the voice that revolutionized American pop culture, that made horror movies just as American as cherry pie. I just loved Freddy Krueger. I just think Freddy Krueger is one of the most legendary horror movie villains. But I actually had to give this one to the man behind the mask, the hockey mask wielding machete killer himself, Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th franchise. I know I did go with the kind of majority pick. I think if you were to ask a majority, they would mostly go with Jason. And I went with Jason, honestly, because if I look at the best horror movie killer, I just think of like body count. When I see Jason, I think body count movies. You know, I'm thinking a lot of boobs, a lot of blood, a lot of mayhem, a lot of hacking, slashing, and whatnot. And that's what Jason does. And I think that hockey mask is just so goddamn iconic. Anybody sees that, everybody knows what it's from. And that's just great, man. I just love Jason Voorhees. I think it's one of the best horror movie characters of all time. And I do have him as the winner of the Carrie Award for Best Horror Movie Killer. It is objective. It really is one of those three. Best horror movie killer. You can't go wrong with any of them. I actually was going to go with Freddy for a while because of the one-liners and Robert Englund and stuff like that. But, I mean, I look at the actors that played Jason, guys like Ted White, guys like Richard Brooker, guys like Kane Hodder, guys like C.J. Graham. I mean, I just think all these guys did such a great job playing this role of this unstoppable force, this unstoppable monster of Crystal Lake that drowned back in 57. And I just love Jason Voorhees. I think it's the most legendary horror movie killer, because when I think body count, I think Jason, I think boobs, blood, and mayhem, and I think that's got to be why Jason Voorhees wins Best Horror Movie Killer at the Carrie Awards. So, yeah, that is the Best Horror Movie Killer. Let's jump back. We'll jump back to another big one. We'll finish all the small ones, and then we'll get to the top three, because this. I'm actually having a lot of fun with this. I hope y'all are too. But that brings me to Best Supporting Actress in a Horror Film, and the nominees are Ali Larter for Final Destination, Catherine Hicks for Child's Play, Ashley Lawrence for Hellraiser, Wendy Roby for The People Under the Stairs, and Karen Black for Burnt Offerings. For whatever reason, I had the hardest time picking a winner of these 5. And the reason, honestly, is because when you think women in horror, you always think of the leading women, which that category is chock full of great leading actress performances, and it'll be very fun to talk about. But when you look at these 5, none of them really jump out as, oh, that's the final girl, obviously, because they're supporting female characters. So I know a lot of people, Wendy Roby for The People Under the Stairs, who the hell is that? That's actually the woman that plays Mommy in the film. And I just thought she was so good in that, man. Like, she's just this creepy, old, prude woman that's disgusting to look at, has a nasty personality, just a grimy woman, and just such cold-hearted wench of a woman, man. Just don't like Wendy Roby at all. But she did such a good job because that's what the character called for. I'll always remember the scene in the kitchen, which nobody mentions the scene in The People Under the Stairs, one of my favorite Wes Craven films. Her daughter confronts her, and Wendy Roby doesn't think she could be seen, and she's kind of at the cabinet, and she's crying, and she says, "I see you," in a monotone voice to Wendy Roby, and Wendy Roby kind of turns around with this kind of perverse smile, and she says, "And I see you, dearie." And all of a sudden, she just pulls out a ginormous butcher's knife from the cabinet and screams at the top of her lungs and charges, and I just love that. That's one of my favorite, like, crazy women moment in horror. Like this, I actually can say the B word, so I will say one. This crazy bitch went crazy, you know, and she just I actually got that word approved. We went through technical things to get that word approved, so I can say one a show. But man, this woman was bonkers, and her going after her daughter in that movie at the end is just so well done. I think it's a really underrated performance that nobody ever talks about, nobody gives credit to. But man, I'm a huge fan. Of course, Karen Black in Burnt Offerings. I think Karen Black is just, for one of those, she has to be on here because she's one of the most legendary horror actresses. Trilogy of Terror, where she plays 4 different roles in 3 stories. I mean, that's, of course, House of Thousand Corpses. Of course, Burnt Offerings. Excuse me. I think Karen Black is a horror legend, and I think her best performance as a supporting role is in Burnt Offerings, where she plays, the mother, and she's just kind of off. The entire movie, you can tell there's something off about this woman, and then I don't want to, it's one of those things you ruin the movie if you tell the person what's going on, but she just, her slow turn is just fantastic. Love Karen Black. Ashley Lawrence, the voluptuous Ashley Lawrence, baby. Very good looking woman to this day. She's really cool. I actually followed her on Twitter back when I had Twitter for a long time. Just a uber positive person. One of those people that you like to follow on Twitter. I just love Ashley Lawrence personally, and I personally love her performance. I think she does a great job in Hellraiser as the final girl. But the thing what's different about her character, and the reason that she's not really the quote-unquote final girl, is because in the first half of the movie, she's hardly in it. And that's why it really becomes a supporting role. She's almost just there at the end to confront the situation. And I think she does a fantastic job. I just love her performance in it. She's really good to look at and a really good actress to get behind. Just love Ashley Lawrence in the Hellraiser films as Kirsty Cotton. Catherine Hicks in Child's Play. Absolutely love Catherine Hicks in Child's Play. I think she does a great job as Mrs. Barkley, Andy's mother. Of course, her son believes that the doll has come back to life and is trying to kill everybody and whatnot. And I think once she realizes that the doll is real, her performance is flawless. Like, she's running around New York City trying to find the peddler, and the police officer's like, "Where are you going?" She's like, "To find Chucky." I just love that, man. That is just awesome stuff. Like, this woman's running around New York City looking for a killer doll. Like, that's an awesome mom. Like, that like, my mom would do that crap for me, you know what I mean? But man, just love Catherine Hicks. Think her performance is super underrated. And Allie Larder in Final Destination as the Claire River character. Just really think she did a good job of this movie as well. I love when they get off the plane and she's sitting in the office and they say, "Why did you get off the plane? You're not friends with any of these people." And she says, "I just had a feeling." And you really feel when she says that. I think it's a really good type of performance. And I think there are a lot of lines in this movie that kind of go over people's head because they've really become body count movies now, especially from part 3 onward. They're body count movies, even part 2 onward, you could say. But I love there's a point where Devon Sawa was trying to tell her, oh well, death is it's planned and all this stuff, and she says, my father walked into a 7-Eleven and the guy was trying to rob the store, and my dad turned around too quickly and got shot. He wasn't going to do anything. She says, shot right in front of me. She goes, do you think it was his design death to die that day? And like, she kind of puts into perspective the argument side. Even though she believes him, even though she's with him, she kind of says, well, look at this side. And I think that's really strong, like to bring up something like that in a horror film, something that a real life that has happened to people, something that is actually horrific. And I just think she does a good job as the love interest. She's believable. She has some good facial expressions. I think she's very likable. At the same time, they're trying to make her out like the weird goth girl, but she's so goddamn attractive that it's impossible to kind of fall for that. And she really brings a lot of her charisma and adds it to said role. So I love Ali Larter in that. And as for my winner, I actually go with Ali Larter. I think Ali Larter deserves this. A little bit underrated, a little bit new school horror, but I'm going to give it to Ali Larter for Best Supporting Actress at the Carrie Awards for Final Destination. I love her performance in it. I think she does a great job. I think she has a good heart to the film, and I think she just nailed it. So yes, Miss Ali Larter. Let's see. Let's go to one we can run through really quick. Best Original Score. This one was the easiest choice for me. We have the nominees are The Disaster Piece for It Follows, Goblin for Deep Red, Suspiria, Dawn of the Dead, John Harrison for Creepshow, another really underrated score, John Carpenter for Halloween, and Fabio Frizzi for Zombie 2. All due respect to the other 4. I love all 4 scores. I think they're legendary, but this was a slam dunk. John Carpenter for the Halloween score. John Carpenter, pretty much almost every one of his scores for The Thing, The Fog, They Live. You could go on literally forever, name his entire filmography. Almost every film he ever made had a fantastic score, and Halloween is the one that everybody remembers. Everybody hears that Halloween theme, they know what it's from. And it's just, that's just too easy. That's a slam dunk. John Carpenter for Halloween, Best Original Score at the Carrie Awards, slam dunk choice. But again, like I said, no disrespect to any of the other nominees. I think they're all great scores as well, especially Goblin and John Harrison. I think they do a great job. Best Original Screenplay. We are going to do, all right, here are the nominees. George A. Romero for Dawn of the Dead, Kevin Williamson for Scream, Claudio Fragazzo for Troll 2. Troll 2 got a goddamn horror movie Carrie Award nominee. I had to make sure Troll 2 got a nom because it's legendarily bad. Stephen King for Pet Sematary and Clive Barker for Hellraiser. These, again, I'm not going to go into all of these because I are limited on time. I have about 19 minutes left, and I want to be able to talk about the biggies for a while. So I'm going to go with Kevin Williamson for Scream. I think it's a script that really revolutionized the genre. It's a script that came out at the right time. It was a script that was self-aware, and it was a script that the genre needed. It was so important for that movie to come out. And as much as I love a guy like Wes Craven, and as much as I think he's one of the best horror directors of all time, I do think that movie works more for the screenplay as opposed to his direction. I think if it wasn't for Kevin Williamson's script, that Scream would not have the impact that it has today. It's a movie that changed the genre, and I've had a whole show on Scream talking for an hour with my good buddy Brian White. Shout out to you, Brian, one of my best friends. We went all in depth with that movie. But yeah, Kevin Williamson for Scream, Best Original Screenplay at the Carrie Awards, yes. Another quick one. Best Horror Movie Monster and or Creature. We have the nominees: Frankenstein as Boris Karloff, Dracula, Bela Lugosi, Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr., Cloverfield the Monster. I really like a CG monster. Wow, I know everybody's crazy. I think they technically call it just Clover from Cloverfield, and the Xenomorph from Alien. This was tough, but I actually really wanted to give a Universal Monster an award here, and I ended up going with Frankenstein, Boris Karloff. I think for a lot of reasons, because it's the first monster that everybody remembers. Like 1931 was when Frankenstein came out, and everybody remembers that iconic image of Frankenstein's head in the shadows and throwing the girl in the pond. I just think Frankenstein's one of the most legendary monsters, obviously brought back from all these pieces that were already dead, brought back to life by the crazy Dr. Frankenstein. So technically Frankenstein's monster. I know people want to get technical here. But yeah, I thought Boris Karloff was a pretty easy choice here. Only because it's just a legendary role. Everybody knows Frankenstein. It's a legendary movie monster. Everybody knows Boris Karloff as Frankenstein. I think it was an easy choice. Lifetime Achievement Award, and then we're going to get into the final four here. Lifetime Achievement Award, I gave it to two guys because I could not pick between the two. I love them both. I picked Lon Chaney Jr. and Angus Scrimm. Yes, I love both of these guys immensely. I think what they did for the genre, their passion for the fans of the genre, was just unprecedented. Of course, Lon Chaney just did The Wolf Man was his most iconic role, but he did a lot of good movies after that too in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Spider Baby, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I love that film, a Jack Hill film. Think he does just a fantastic job in that, and I just think he had a lot of revolutionary roles. And of course, Angus Scrimm, the tall man from Phantasm. I just always really liked him. I didn't have the pleasure to meet him. He was going to do a convention by me, Monster Mania Con. He didn't end up doing the convention. I believe he was sick when I went, and I was very upset because he didn't live too much longer after he canceled for that event. But I just love Angus Scrimm. I think he's just a fantastic horror icon, a guy that everybody I know that met him respected him, said he had nothing but a class act, loved the genre, and was just a cooler than hell guy. And I just, when I look for people that would deserve a Lifetime Achievement Horror Award, a Carrie Award, I would think of these two guys first. Vincent Price obviously would be up there as well. I mean, people that just loved and appreciated the genre, didn't look down upon it, and actually, in essence, embraced being a part of the community. I just think that's great stuff. I love Lon Chaney, I love Angus Scrimm, and hell, I'll throw Vincent Price in there too, unofficially. I didn't have it written down, but yeah, those three guys, when I think of people that love this genre and people that made this genre great, Vincent Price, Lon Chaney Jr., and Angus Scrimm are three guys that I automatically think of. So shout out to those three guys. All right, the big four. Are we ready for it? The big final four. Let's start with Best Director in a Horror Film. This was tough. We have Dario Argento for Suspiria, Stanley Kubrick for The Shining, John Carpenter for Halloween, Steven Spielberg for Jaws, and Brian De Palma for Carrie. These are five of the best directors ever, let alone horror movies. All five of these guys are amazing. Spielberg has won Oscars. I believe De Palma has been nominated for some Oscars. Kubrick has won an Oscar, not in directing, he won it for visual effects. But and then you look at guys like Carpenter or Argento that are, I think, the two best top horror directors of all time when it comes to that respective genre. And this was very hard, man. I mean, look at the movies, Suspiria, The Shining, Halloween, Jaws, and Carrie. 5 movies that are directed to perfection. All of those movies are so gorgeous and well made. I mean, you can't argue that. Whether you're a big fan or not of any of those movies, you got to admit they're really well made and they're really well shot, and there are scenes and shots and cinematography that you remember, that stick with you. And I think that's the best thing a director can do. He can take the subject matter at hand and he can make it memorable forever. And I think all these directors do that. Of course, The Shining is just one of the most memorable horror movies. I think Stanley Kubrick does a fantastic job directing. John Carpenter, of course, no one will ever forget Halloween. I was just talking before at how legendary the scope and look and feel of the atmosphere that movie has. Jaws, of course, which a lot of people will argue, oh, it's not a horror movie. I don't know. It has a killer shark that kills people. I think it's kind of a horror movie. Brian De Palma, of course, Carrie, and the legendary, the horror building that this girl that doesn't fit in, and going to the prom and getting pig's blood dumped in you, and all the angles and shots, and I love how he kills the sound when Carrie's going to the stage, almost as though this is Carrie's biggest moment of her life as she walks to the front of the stage. I just always thought that was a great scene because you know what's about to happen. We all know what's about to happen, but Carrie White doesn't. And that's what the tension builds, and that's what a good director does. He builds the tension in a horror film. But I can only pick one. This was very difficult for me, but this is one of those ones I'm going to have to go with my more biased pick here, because I guess a lot of film snobs would say, oh, Spielberg, Spielberg's won Oscars. I gave him the nom because I love Jaws, but I'm going to go with Dario Argento for Suspiria. Yes, I do believe that Suspiria is the best directed horror film of all time. Yes, even better than The Shining. As big of a Kubrick mark as I am going with Argento for Suspiria. I just think, I got the movie on 4K a few months back for Christmas, got it for myself. Christmas gift for myself. And that is the only movie I could ever think of that takes me into another world for an hour and a half or so, and just I am totally entranced. There's no phone, there's no outside world, there's nothing but me, the screen, and the brilliantly lit hallways in that film. I just think it's the best directed horror movie of all time. I just love it. It's creepy. It's weird. It doesn't make sense at times. The rain is almost singing. The lullaby score by Goblin. Just everything in it. I think it's a perfect horror movie. Of course, I always loved the finale of the film where the crazed woman with the piece of glass and bleeding from her lips is laughing and running at old Jessica Harper. I just think it's just fantastically directed. I think it's aesthetically the most beautiful horror movie ever made. So that will go to the Carrie Award goes to Dario Argento for Suspiria. Yes, best director. That one is a legend. So thank you, Mr. Argento. I bet you that surprised a lot of people. I think a lot of people would probably think I'd go with Kubrick, which would not be a wrong choice either. But the final three here, we've got about 11 minutes to go here. We're going to get into the final three categories. These are the biggies, the biggest of the big, the best of the best. Let's do it. Let's start it off with... Let's do Best Actor in a Leading Role in a Horror Film. Yes, here are the nominees. Of course, we have Jack Nicholson for The Shining, Anthony Perkins for Psycho, David A. Hess for Last House on the Left, Ken Foree for Dawn of the Dead, and Christian Bale for American Psycho. Yes. These five guys just do a phenomenal job in all their respective roles, and this was very difficult to choose as well. Of course, Nicholson is just legendary as Jack Torrance, and a little slow tonight, Lloyd, and you set him up, I'll knock him down. Here's Johnny, and go check it out. I mean, you could quote every line he says in that movie because it's always memorable, and it's because of Nicholson. Nicholson takes that performance and animates it into something bigger and better and badder than it could ever be. I just think he does a fantastic job in that film. Anthony Perkins in Psycho, what else could you say that hasn't been said, really? One of the first real true kind of maniac type performances, a psycho performance, if you will. It's just a fantastic job. A boy's best friend is his mother, and all this weird stuff, and they'll see and they'll know that I won't even harm a fly. I just love Anthony Perkins in that film. The demonic smile he gives you as he leaves the screen. I just think Anthony Perkins does a fantastic job in Psycho. I think he's just a phenomenal actor. David Hess, of course, for Last House on the Left, playing Krug, the awful, sadistic greaser. Well, I guess not a greaser, but just a vigilante, just a gross guy, man. Just bad news written all over him. I think David Hess does a fantastic job in Last House on the Left as this kind of grimy character, just treating his son like crap and telling him, oh, if you do this, I'll give you your next fix, and forcing women to pee their pants. Just sadistic, man. It's one of the most sadistic movies ever, Last House on the Left. And David Hess is the reason for that, because he really plays it like a real sadistic son of a gun. Like, he does a really good job. It's terrifying to watch. Ken Foree in Dawn of the Dead, one of my favorite horror leads of all time. That's not a villain, of course. I would say my favorite horror lead that is not a villain, definitely Ken Foree in Dawn of the Dead as Peter. Just seemed like the voice of reason throughout the entire movie, a guy that was always trying to make the best of things and always trying to calm everybody down and come up with that proverbial game plan. I think Ken Foree does a fantastic job in this movie. I just love Ken Foree in this flick. I think he does just phenomenally. And of course, Christian Bale in American Psycho. What else could you say that hasn't been said about him? There's two Psycho movies that you can't say much more. Of course, the suave businessman that's evil and killing all these people, and do you like Huey Lewis in the News and all this stuff. I mean, Christian Bale has gone on to be nominated for a few Oscars, and he's also won an Oscar, I believe, for The Fighter back in 2011. He just does a fantastic job here, and I would argue this is his best performance, and it's not even a crime. It's more than a crime that he wasn't nominated for Best Actor. That goes to show you that the people that run the Oscars have no taste in film. That if you don't like his performance in this, I seriously would love to get your head evaluated. You could dislike the movie all you want. I know a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't make sense. But if you don't like his performance, I literally don't know. I don't know what you're thinking or where you're coming from, to be honest. But if I had to pick one here, I'm going to go with an upset. I am going to go with an upset simply because I feel like Perkins gets his due. I feel like Nicholson has won Oscars, so obviously he gets his due. Bale has won an Oscar. He gets his due. So it really, for me, came down to David Hess and Ken Foree. It came down to probably my favorite horror villain in a horror male villain in a movie and my favorite horror male lead in a movie. And for a while, I was going to have this be a tie, but I ultimately said horror movies is not about lovey-dovey and good stuff and mushy-gushy. It's about the sadistic pleasure that these villains do and get from causing pain and inflicting pain. And that's why I had to go with David Hess for Last House on the Left. David A. Hess is the best leading actor at the Carrie Awards. Yes, David Hess finally gets his due, his moment in the sun. Hold that Carrie Award up high and dry. So David Hess is the best leading actor in a horror film. Best actress. This was the second hardest category for me to pick because this was just impossible. We have Bette Davis in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Angela Bettis in May, Amy Steele in Friday the 13th Part 2, Sissy Spacek in Carrie, and Pamela Springsteen in Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. All five of these performances are legendary. Bette Davis as playing the Baby Jane character that all these years ago was this big child star, only to see her sister take her fame over when she became a big actress when she grew up, and she's kind of just laying in the kind of weights, and she's torturing her sister throughout this movie, singing very creepily. She's almost wants to turn her life back to when she was a kid, and it's terrifying, man. She just has a great performance in this movie. I love Bette Davis. Angela Bettis in May. The role she was born to play for. She obviously played Carrie White in the remake of Carrie for the 2002 version. Angela Bettis just knocks this role out of the park, runs, catches the ball her goddamn self. Love this performance. She's awkward. She's weird. She's everything in between. She's the most awkward, weird girl you ever meet. And as these cracks form in her doll case, these cracks form in her life, and everything falls and crumbles around her. And it's her slow descent to madness, her slow descent to craziness, and creating the perfect person that I think that Angela Bettis deserves this nomination. I think she does a fantastic job, a very underrated actress and a very underrated performance. I love Angela Bettis in May. Amy Steele, Friday the 13th Part 2, my favorite final girl of all time. She had guts, she was hot, she was everything that a final girl should be. Love Amy Steele. There's not really much I can say other than I love her. Sissy Spacek for Carrie. It's a very similar role to the Angela Bettis May character, and I will preface this by saying I named the award show after Carrie, so I feel like it would be tough to kind of just give her the same award too. So I didn't want to be too biased there, even though I love Sissy Spacek. I think she's a fantastic actress, and of course, I'm not even gonna make you guys wait. The winner of Best Actress. This is a biased pick. I can't help it. I'm madly in love, and I don't care who knows it. I picked for a Best Actress at the Carrie Awards, Pamela Springsteen for Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3, also known as Angela Baker, the Angel of Death. Yes. Oh my God. There's no character in any movie I love more than this character. Like, this character kicks ass. She murders people that are immorally, correct, and you have a potty mouth if you do drugs, if you do something wrong, if you're annoying, and the one-liners, and her one-liners put Freddy Krueger to shame in some of these movies. Just a fantastic actress. I love Pamela Springsteen. I really, really wish she'd come out and do a convention. I would pay my entire bankroll to get a picture with her and her to autograph my Sleepaway Camp 3 poster. This is the fanboy in me talking, obviously. But there's no words to describe how much I love Pamela Springsteen. I just think she's one of the best ever. I just love her performance. I think she had fun with the role. She was scary. She was funny. She was the most grand performance of them all. And with the Best Picture category, we're obviously going to get into right now. But I just love Pam Springsteen. Think she did a great job. And when I go to watch a female horror movie performance, a Best Actress performance, I look no further than Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. I look no further than Angela Baker. I look no further than Pam Springsteen in Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. I think she's just an absolute legend. So Pam Springsteen, Best Actress. And now, the final 2 minutes of the show, we are getting into Best Picture. It's Best Picture time, Matt's dancing. Matt doesn't know what it is. Here are the nominees for Best Picture at the Carrie Awards. Sorry, the Caddy Awards, yeah. Best Picture noms: Alien,
Carrie, Cannibal Holocaust, Dawn of the Dead, Halloween, The Shining, Suspiria, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Thing. We're getting into which one is Best Picture. I will say this first. To anybody watching, I appreciate you watching because I am wrapping this up in a minute or so. I would love to hear what you guys think of that list. Which one is the best, or your favorite if it's not one on that list of your personal favorite. Halloween.
I had to, again, it was very tough. It came down to two movies for me, really. It came down to Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead, of course, people know is my favorite horror movie, my favorite movie of all time, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my second favorite movie, horror movie of all time. So it's hard for me to, if I had to play favorites, obviously it goes to Dawn of the Dead. And then if you had to go to the majority, I think a movie that more people like, I would say Texas Chainsaw. But I don't know. I got to be honest. This was very tough for me, but I ended up going with Dawn of the Dead. I wanted to see Dawn of the Dead win Best Picture. It's a biased choice, I know, but it's my favorite movie of all time, so I couldn't really help but throw it on there. But yeah, wrapping this up. I think I got, how many seconds do I got? Oh, I got 30 seconds. 25 seconds. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. I really, truly appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I'm sorry we were a little bit pressed for time here. I just love all these people, performances, filmmakers, actors, actresses, writers, you name it, cinematographers, makeup guys, just legendary. But thank you all for joining. Of course, to recap, Best Picture, Dawn of the Dead, Best Actor, David Hess, Best Actress, Pam Springsteen. Have a beautiful day. Thanks for watching The Graveyard. Too sweet, ladies and gentlemen. Peace. Well, thank you all for watching. I really, truly appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I'm sorry we were